Yo, what's up guys, Alpha, and today I'm going to be doing a new installment in the Brews from Scratch series where I called myself building a deck completely from the beginning and talking you through my thought process as I go. In this episode I'm going to be doing green-black Tyvar Citadel in Explorer, which is a deck that I've been wanting to build for quite a while now. So, Tyvar, new card from the latest set, really powerful, 3-mana Planeswalker, and the passive ability is really cool, so it allows you to activate abilities of creatures you control as though those had haste. So, any creature with a tap ability, typically quite weak because you have to wait a turn to use it, but Tyvar allows you to activate them immediately, which is huge. Then the +1, you can untap a creature, so like I said, if the creature has a tap ability, the +1 allows you to reuse that, which is really nice. And then -2, mill 3 cards, and then return a creature with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So the key thing with Tyvar is if you can find creatures that cost 1 or 2 that have powerful tap abilities, then you really start to abuse this card. And the main reason why I'm really excited for it in this particular shell, I mean, I love Citadel decks in general, is because of the interaction with Priest of Forgotten Gods and the manadorks. So first of all, before we get into that, if you've not used Citadel before, it's basically a sacrifice deck that has a combo finish. And that's a really powerful combination because sacrifice decks are generally very good against creature decks. They're very good in mid-range matchups generally, but the big weakness of sacrifice decks for the most part is they take a long time to close the game out. So having a sacrifice deck with a combo finish that can just win you the game on the spot kind of goes a long way to mitigate the natural weakness of sacrifice decks. So bonus is Citadel, 6-mana artifacts, and it lets you play cards off the top of your library for life instead of mana. The way we've set this deck up is we want to try and ramp into the Citadel and then try and build the deck in a way that we're likely to just be able to win the same turn, playing a bunch of cards off the top and then activating this ability to make the opponent lose 10 life. And then if we have that in combination with an effect like Mayhem Devil or Zulaport Cutthroat, we can just deal 20 damage out of nowhere. So I'm a massive fan of Citadel. I think the deck is so much fun to play, and I think, like I said, I think Tyvar could be a really great addition to the deck. First of all, because of Priest of Forgotten Gods, and also because of manadorks like Llanowar Elves and Elvish Mystic. So I'm just going to add all these to the deck because I'm pretty certain they're all going to make the cut. You know, I have kind of theory crafted this deck in my head a little bit beforehand, so I kind of know what I want to be running in the deck, but I'm going to explain all of the choices as I'm putting them in the deck. So first of all, going to go over Priest of Forgotten Gods once I've added these in. So Priest of Forgotten Gods, really, really powerful card in this particular deck. I think Priest of Forgotten Gods is at its best in Citadel, and I think Priest of Forgotten Gods is one of the biggest reasons to be playing Tyvar. I think this is a really nice payoff for Tyvar. So Priest, first of all, in the Citadel deck, you typically want to be running Collected Company because, first of all, Collected Company is really great once you have a Citadel in play, right? Because, you know, there are creatures that we want to be running like Prosperous Innkeeper and Woe Strider that basically stop you from bricking once you have got the Citadel in play. But the other really nice thing is that when you don't have Citadel or you're not able to ramp into it, Collected Company gives you something really powerful to do outside of that. I'm not really a big fan of Citadel decks that don't run Company because when you can't get the Citadel in play, you're kind of just running a slow, mopey sacrifice deck, whereas Collected Company just gives you extra burst, and since we're running manadorks, we can also ramp into it as well. So the nice thing about Priest of Forgotten Gods is because of Collected Company, we want to be running a fairly high creature count, which probably means that we can't really afford to run much interaction. Like, I'm going to have to see how the numbers work out for this, but if we're running Citadel, Tyvar, and Collected Company, I don't think we can afford to run any other non-creature spells in the deck at all, or we're not going to have enough hits for Collected Company. And so Priest of Forgotten Gods being a creature that also acts as interaction is really important. Otherwise, we're just trying to race and we have no way to interact. So first of all, Priest is really nice at giving us interaction. Second of all, is great at allowing us to ramp into the Citadel, right? Citadel's obviously a 6-mana card, so getting 2 black mana, you know, especially because the Citadel costs 3 black, allows us to ramp into Citadel as early as turn 3, right? Because we can go Llanowar Elves on turn 1, Priest on turn 2, and then like manadorks on turn 3, tap the manadorks for mana, sacrifice them to the Priest, and then we've got 6 mana for the bonuses Citadel. So Priest allows us to ramp into the Citadel, which is really huge, provides us some card advantage, drains the opponent out, which is going to be our kind of backup plan. If we don't have the Citadel, I'm going to be trying to just run like a regular sacrifice game plan where we're trying to burn the opponent out and interact with them. And then it works so well with the Tyvar because, like I said, we can activate it immediately, which is the biggest weakness of Priest normally. We can untap it with the Tyvar to activate it again if we have a bunch of creatures in play. We can also mill it, you know, use the -2 to get it back from the graveyard and then activate it immediately. So I think this interaction is really sick. And like I said, I think Priest is at its best in this shell as well. And then additionally, because we want to be running manadorks because we're ramping into the Citadel, these also work nicely with Tyvar as well because we can play the Elvish Mystic or the Llanowar Elves with a Tyvar in play and just tap them for mana immediately, which is pretty sick as well. And then again, you know, we can minus the Tyvar to get back one of the manadorks and tap it immediately. So I think that this is a deck that can definitely abuse Tyvar pretty well. I'm just going to put the rest of the cards in the deck that I think are almost certainly going to be staples. First of all, Prosperous, Innkeeper, and... wait, why is that not coming? Oh, I can't spell today. Whoops, hold on. But yeah, Prosperous, Innkeeper, and Woe Strider are almost always going to be staples in this deck because they basically ensure that we don't brick when we're comboing off because... Wow, I can't spell at all today. There we go. Okay, so... Woe Strider and Prosperous Innkeeper are really nice to ensure we don't brick because the way the Citadel works, the two main ways that you can brick when you're trying to combo off is first of all running out of life because obviously every card that you're playing off the top of the library costs you life to play, and the second way you can brick is with hitting lands on the top because obviously you can only play one land each turn, so if you have the Citadel in play and you play a land off the top and then the next card is a land, you kind of just brick there as well, and Innkeeper and Strider go a really long way to stop that. So Innkeeper giving us life every time we put a creature in play just helps to ensure that we don't run out of life when we're comboing off, right? If you can get 2 Innkeepers in play, you're basically guaranteed to not brick in terms of life total, which is really huge. It also creates a treasure, which is really important as well because... it allows us to ramp into Citadel even faster. The weakness of running the manadorks here is that they can be killed, because of the presence of mono green devotion in the format. A lot of decks are choosing to run one mana interaction right now, which means that we can't always rely on these, whereas the Innkeeper, the fact it produces a treasure means that unless the opponent has artifact removal, the treasure is always going to be able to ramp us into the Citadel, which is really nice. And then Woe Strider, the fact that we can sacrifice a creature for free to scry one, basically just means that we can just scry away any lands off the top. So if we have Strider and Innkeeper together, we're almost, not almost always, but for the most part, you're not going to brick once you have the Citadel in play. And this is kind of why it's very important to be running Collected Company in the deck. Like I said, it gives us a backup to do when we don't have the Citadel. But when we do have the Citadel, the fact that we can company into Strider or Innkeeper or both potentially means that we're way less likely to brick once the Citadel is going off, if that makes sense. The other kind of interesting deck building puzzle here is trying to figure out the number of lands that we want in the deck because... typically, you don't really want to be running too many lands in a Citadel because then you're more likely to hit multiple lands on top of your library and brick. And running manadorks definitely helps that a lot, right? Because we're running 8 manadorks, we can afford to go slightly lower on lands. But the issue there is, like I said, people are running early interaction for your manadorks right now. So if you keep a 2-land hand, for example, and you play your manadork and it gets fatal pushed or killed straight away, you can be left in a situation where you just don't have enough lands, right? Especially if you're trying to play a 6-mana card, that can leave you in kind of an awkward spot. So initially, I think I'm going to go down to 21, and that's the absolute lowest that I would want to go down to, I think. So for now, I'm just going to go down to 21. I definitely don't want to go below 21 because, like I said, even if we do end up running Gilded Goose, Gilded Goose is another option potentially for manadorks. I still think you're going to run into issues where you keep a 2-land hand, your manadork gets fatal pushed or whatever, and then you just don't draw a land for ages because your land count is too low, and then you just can't play any of the cards from your hand. In terms of the manadorks themselves, I do think I want 4 Elvish Mystic, 4 Llanowar Elves. Gilded Goose is another card that you can run in addition to it, but you really don't want to be running too many manadorks because they're just bad draws in the late game, right? You don't mind having it on turn 1 or 2, even turn 3 or 4 if you're trying to ramp into the Citadel, it's not too bad, but if you're drawing them later in the game, they are really bad top decks, and the more manadorks you run, the more likely you are to draw them as well. Plus, I think space is going to be pretty tight. The other issue with running a lot of manadorks is they're not great hits off Collected Company either. I think if we are going to fit Tyvar, Collected Company, and Citadel all in the same deck, then we need to run a fairly high creature count. But if a lot of our creatures are manadorks, then Collected Company is kind of low impact anyway if we're just getting 1-mana manadorks. Now, on the flip side, we do have some ways to mitigate these being bad top decks because we're running Priest of Forgotten Gods and Woe Striders. So even if we do draw one of these on turn 5 or 6, oftentimes we can just play it and then just sacrifice it to the Priest or Strider. So compared to a deck like Mono Green Devotion, we do actually have good use for these. And obviously Tyvar allows us to activate them immediately as well. So that's pretty nice. So if we look at the deck, what have we got so far? So 21 creatures. For Collected Company, we want to have a minimum of 24. And also when I build the sideboard, I want to make sure that most of the cards in the sideboard are creatures because I really don't want to have to board out Collected Company. Like I said, the awkward thing about Citadel, if you're not running Company, is the deck can be kind of low impact. You don't really have a good top end to the deck. So I want to ensure that we have a high creature count in the sideboard as well so that we can consistently keep Collected Company in. So another card that I'm very interested in running is Zulaport Cutthroat. Now this is important because first of all it allows us to stick in green-black. A lot of the Citadel decks will be running Mayhem Devil, which I'll get up if you're not familiar with it. So Mayhem Devil is a really sick card in Sacrifice in general, right? Because as you're doing your Sacrifice game plan with Priest and Waste Rider, not only can you deal direct damage to the opponent, which can often finish them off, but it also provides additional interaction to kill the opponent's creatures. The annoying thing with Mayhem Devil in this particular deck is that it's basically the only red card that we want to be running, and to be honest, now that we've got Zulaport Cutthroat in the format, I'm not sure we really need the Mayhem Devil, and I'm not sure it's worth it in the mana base either, because the thing is with Citadel is you want your mana base to be as painless as possible, so that once you do have the Citadel in play, you have a high life total, and splashing a third colour definitely has its cost in terms of the mana base, right? You have to run more shock lands. Even if you run more pathways, it can end up with awkward situations where you sometimes don't have triple black for the Citadel, so if I can stick to 2 colours, then that's great. And the reason why Zulaport Cutthroat or Mayhem Devil, for example, is important is because it allows you to win off the Citadel trigger the same turn that you play it, because if you're comboing off, you're playing a bunch of stuff on the top of your library, you're scrying away lands with Strider, you're gaining a bunch of life off the Innkeeper. You want to be able to win by sacrificing 10 non-land permanents, and if you have a Zulaport Cutthroat or a Mayhem Devil and you sacrifice 10 creatures, you deal 20 damage because of the death trigger on Zulaport Cutthroat. So you need to be running at least 1 or 2 of these. Before Cutthroat was printed, I was running Meathook Massacre, but in this deck, we can't afford to run any extra non-creatures outside of Tyvar, Coco, and Bolus's Citadel, so it's important that our win condition alongside Citadel is a creature. And Zulaport Cutthroat is really nice in this particular list as well, because it gives us another way to gain life outside of the Innkeeper, right? Because if we have Strider and Cutthroat as we're comboing off, we can sacrifice stuff to scry lands to the bottom that also gains us life back off the Cutthroat, whilst dealing direct damage to the opponent as well. So, say for example, we're against Mono Green Devotion and they get a Karn in play. Karn prevents us from activating the each opponent loses 10 life mode on Bolus's Citadel, but we can still win off Cutthroat just by sacrificing a bunch of our creatures to the Waste Rider. Now, you could consider running, just 2 copies of this, for example. I think that would be fine if you just needed it as a win condition, but in this particular deck, I'm going to start off with running 4 because of Tyvar. I think with Tyvar, you want to be running a high density of important 1 and 2 mana creatures. Tyvar works very nicely with Prosperous Innkeeper, for example, because if we play the Innkeeper and it gets killed, we can just minus, get the Innkeeper back, which gives us another treasure to help us ramp into the Citadel. And, if we have Citadel in play and we have an Innkeeper in the graveyard and we hit a Tyvar off the top, we can play the Tyvar, minus it, get back the Innkeeper, and then we're gaining life as well. So I think this is a really nice interaction, and I think Cutthroat is a really nice interaction with Tyvar as well. Now, this is kind of awkward as well, because Collected Company is most impactful when you're running a lot of 3-drops, right? If you're running a lot of 2-drops, you're not getting as much value off the company, but because of Tyvar and because, Zulaport Cutthroat is basically the only real option that we have in green-black, I think it kind of works out fine. Now, because of that issue that I was talking about with Collected Company, where you do want to be running a lot of 3-drops, I think I do want to be running at least a couple more 3-drops so that we are getting good value off the company. And for that reason, I don't think Gilded Goose is going to make the cut. I mean, to be honest, I didn't think it would anyway. Gilded Goose is pretty nice in that it can gain us life, which gives us more life to work with the Citadel. It does fix our mana, which isn't that important if we're just running a 2-color version. The main weakness of Gilded Goose over Elvish Mystic or Llanowar Elves is that it's 1 use, right? So the thing we can do with Elvish Mystic is we can go Elvish Mystic on turn 1, into Waste Rider on turn 2, then untap, and then ramp into Collected Company on turn 3 as well. Whereas since Gilded Goose is just single use, even though it can produce foods that as a mana sink and gains us life, I think it's just strictly worse than these 2 for what we're building it for. So I think what I'm going to do is cut the Gilded Goose and just try and fit probably just 3 more copies of a 3-drop into the deck. Now, the first one that springs to mind is Callous Blood Mage. This is a card that I've been very high on in Citadel in the past. So the reason why this card is great is all 3 modes on it are great for a start. So when you're comboing off with Citadel, the ability to make a 1/1 basically means that if we have an Innkeeper in play, it only costs us 1 life because we gain a life back when the Blood Mage enters, and we gain a life back when we put the 1/1 in play. If we have a Strider in play, we can also sacrifice the 1/1 to not only get us a scry, but also gain us a life back as well. If we play the Blood Mage off the top with Citadel and we see a land on top, we can also just use the ability to draw a card and lose a life to clear that land off the top, and the ability to exile the opponent's graveyard is very relevant against decks like Greasefang and Phoenix, and getting rid of Croxer against Rakdos Midrange. So All three are very good when you're comboing off with Citadel. It's also a really sick card to hit off the Collected Company as well, obviously, because, we can just get this into play and draw a card. We can exile the opponent's graveyard at instant speed, potentially. So if we are against a deck like Greasefang, we can potentially Collected Company before they get back the Parhelion. And if we hit a Blood Mage, we can exile the opponent's graveyard at instant speed. And it's just a really solid card to ramp into. If we have turn 1 Elvish Mystical Llanowar Elves, we can just ramp into this on turn 2, draw an extra card, and have a body on the battlefield. So Blood Mages is a really sick card, obviously. I am going to have a quick look through the 3-drop creatures just to make sure that I haven't missed anything else out potentially. But yeah, Blood Mage is my front runner for the last 3-drop in the deck. And like I said, I do want to have a 3-drop just so Collected Company is more valuable, because if we just have Collected Company and a bunch of 2-drops, at best you're just getting 4 mana's worth of creatures off it. So Braids is an interesting one. I'm going to consider that. I'm not sure it's better than Blood Mage, but I'm definitely going to put it in just so I don't forget about it. Could potentially be a sideboard card if we want additional stuff against creatures, although I think there will be better sideboard cards against aggro than that anyway. Fell Stinger is another potential option that plays into the aggro game plan. Gix is a powerful card, but I'm not sure it really fits into this deck particularly. Trespass is an interesting one. It's going to be good against a deck with a lot of removal like Rakdos. Headless Rider, oh no, that's not... I got confused with Midnight Reaper. Headless Rider is not going to be great in this deck, obviously, because it's a zombie tribal card, basically. Where is it? Okay, yeah. I got it confused with Midnight Reaper. So this is a card that I imagine will probably be in the sideboard. This is a very good card against control, because unlike Historic, where they've got Divine Purge, the sweeper that's most common in control decks is Supreme Verdict, and having this just get us a ton of card advantage when they use it is great. We definitely don't want this in the main deck, though, because the weakness of Citadel is we do need to have life to be able to combo off, and if we're against an aggro deck that's pressuring our life total, that's very difficult to do. So having Midnight Reaper also deal less damage isn't great, but I think it is going to be a very good sideboard card against control. Murderous Rider is interesting because it's a Collected Company hit that does act as interaction, but I don't think it's a particularly great Collected Company hit. I'm trying to get a 3-drop here that is something we actively want to hit off the Collected Company. Playcraft is interesting. That sort of effect could be good against aggro. I think there's a better version of this that came out recently, so this could be a potential sideboard card. I'll come back to that one a bit later. Let's have a quick look through other stuff here just to make sure I've not missed anything. Okay, so nothing too great here. Courser of Krufix, can play lands off the top, but we're already playing off the top with Citadel anyway, and it doesn't really synergize with what we're trying to do with the deck overall. Just see if there's anything else here. Nothing really standing out. There will definitely be sideboard cards here, like Reclamation Sage could be a potential option for the sideboard against decks like Enigmatic Incarnation, the Fires deck, and stuff like that. So let's just skip through to the green-black cards here. Gliss is a new card that is powerful and could be a good card to bring against Rakdos Midrange, but I don't think it's something that we want to run in the main deck. It's not a particularly good card to play off the Citadel, so looks like we're probably just going to stick with Blood Mage. I'll quickly go through the colourless cards just in case there's something that I've completely forgotten about. No, okay, sweet. So I think I'm pretty happy to just run the Blood Mage here. Fell Stinger I'm not really high on, to be honest. I don't think that's particularly good with Citadel. Trespasser is interesting. I'm going to put it in the sideboard as a potential option against Rakdos Midrange. And Braids, it does play in with the sacrifice synergies, but, Blood Mage is great with Citadel and without it, which is kind of exactly what we want. So I think this is... I'm pretty happy with the main deck. This is kind of what I theory crafted with the deck in my head. Again, I don't really want to go lower than 21 lands because manadorks do get killed fairly easily in this format, particularly if you're against Rakdos Midrange, and you do want to have a reasonable number of lands, and we do have a lot of ways to clear the top of the library. 21 lands does feel like a reasonable amount. I could see an argument for going up to 22. The thing I do want to double check here is that we've got enough creatures for Collected Company. Okay, 27, that's... Well, it's not perfect, but it's good enough, right? We want at least 24. 27 should guarantee that we get it. Now, 8 of those creatures being manadorks does mean that Collected Company could be low impact, but we've got a decent number of hits, right? Priest is great. Blood Mage and Strider are both great as well. If we're going off with Citadel, Innkeeper's good as well. Cutthroat can be great. So I think I'm pretty happy with that, but I do want to focus with the sideboard on ensuring that we have a high density of creatures. Having said that, the first card I'm going to add to the sideboard is Fatal Push, because like I said, the issue with Citadel is that you need life to be able to go off, and against aggro decks that's going to be tough. So against the aggro decks, I'm definitely going to be boarding out of the Citadel because it is just going to be unreliable, right? The opponent's going to be pressuring our life totals, so we can't really rely on going off with Citadel. But the really nice thing about running Sacrifice in Citadel, or I guess Citadel in Sacrifice, is that Sacrifice as an archetype is just good against creature decks like aggro anyway. So post-sideboard against creature decks, against the fast decks, we can just board out of the bonus for Citadel, board into Fatal Push, and then we're just playing a Sacrifice deck which is naturally good against creature decks anyway. So that's a pretty nice swap, but I do want to make sure that the rest of the cards that I put in the sideboard are good, are creatures, so that we can keep Collected Company in every matchup. So Midnight Reaper is a card that I'm pretty high on against Control. So against Control, we definitely want to be boarding out the Priest of Forgotten Gods because they're not going to be running many creatures, and it's quite slow in that matchup as well. I definitely want to have a creature that can destroy artifacts and enchantments. So we've got Reclamation Sage, but I'm not really sure I like this very much, because if you're up against a deck like Enigmatic Incarnation, Fires of Invention, whatever, you don't want to have to wait to play your creature until they play their Fires or Incarnation. I much prefer these sort of effects like Outland Liberator or Haywire Might. I think the new card Cankerbloom is going to be even better though, because it's slightly more aggressively slanted. The matchups where we want this sort of effect are going to be against like Control and Enigmatic Incarnation Fires, where the 3 power could make a difference. And, you know, I don't think this will ever come up really, but you could proliferate and put more loyalty on your Tyvar if that ever comes up. But for the most part, this is a creature that can kill artifacts and enchantments, which is really important, like I said, against Fires of Invention, Enigmatic Incarnation decks. Against Control, they could also be bringing in Portable Hull. I've seen some people playing Temporary Lockdown as well. This also takes out Search for Azcanta, Hardcast Shark Typhoon. So against Control, you know, I kind of want to be running 3 copies of this. Against Control, I think I would probably be boarding out of Priest of Forgotten Gods, and I could also see be boarding out of Callous Blood Mage. Now, Blood Mage is a generically powerful card, but bring in 4 Reaper, 3 Cankerbloom seems like a nice swap out here. The other really nice thing about Cankerbloom being 2 mana is that we can loop it with the Tyvar. So if we play Cankerbloom, we can activate it to kill like a Fires of Invention or something, and then -2 to get it back to activate it again, which is pretty nice. Then I feel like we also want Graveyard Hate. We already have the Callous Blood Mage, but I do feel like a matchup like Greasefang is going to be quite tough. And another card that I want to test in this shell is Soulless Jailer. Now, this is a card that I was much more high on when I first read it. Unfortunately, this card doesn't stop Croxa. It doesn't stop stuff that enters the graveyard from the stack, but it does stop Phoenix, it does stop Greasefang, and unlike Grafdigger's Cage, it doesn't stop your own Collected Company and bonuses Citadel. So I'm definitely going to try a couple of these and see how they perform. It seems like it could be very good against, like I said, the Greasefang, and particularly Phoenix, where Fiery Impulse doesn't kill it as well. And then another card that I'm also pretty high on that I want to try is Phyrexian Revoker, because I feel like the mono-green matchup can be tough otherwise. Hold on, let me spell it properly this time. So this is basically Pithing Needle on a body, and the nice thing about this card is we can play it against the mono-green Devotion deck, naming Cura to shut off that, naming Khan to shut off their -2. We could also even, if we get it down early, name Llanowar Elves or Elvish Mystic, because unlike Pithing Needle, we can use this to stop mana abilities. And this just seems generically useful, you know. This is another card that we can also bring in against Greasefang, so if the opponent pitches a Parhelion, for example, we can play Revoker, naming Parhelion to stop them crewing it up. So it's another card that can stop Greasefang from comboing off as well. So this is another card that I'm you know, pretty high on testing. Now, we've got to make some cuts here. I mean, to be honest, these one-offs I wasn't 100% sure on. I definitely don't think we want Rex Sage, because I think Cankerbloom just does what we want slightly better. Plague Crafter is interesting. I think there's a newer card, I can't remember the name of it, I'll look it up after this, that does the similar thing, and this could be reasonable against the creature decks, but I feel like with 4 Fatal Push, I feel like Fatal Push is much more valuable because it's just so much more efficient. It's going to be very easy for us to trigger Revolt in this deck because of, you know, we've got Woe Strider, which can sack it instant speed. We've got Priest that can sack it instant speed. We've got the treasures off Innkeeper that we can just use to play Fatal Push as well. So I feel like Fatal Push plus Priest plus like Innkeeper and a Sacrifice Shell should be good enough against the creature decks where we might not need the Plague Crafter. Glisser is an interesting option, but again, you know, I feel like the Rakdos deck is going to be bringing more interaction against us, and this is a card that you need to attack with it first to start getting value, and if your opponent has like a go for the throat or a fatal push of their own, this isn't going to be that great. So I'm going to consider it, if I play and I feel like I need something specifically for Rakdos to slowly generate advantage, then it could be an option there as well. And then Graveyard Trespasser, this is the closest card to something that I might want to run. I do think that this could be actively good as additional graveyard hate. That's also hard for a deck like Rakdos to kill, but in the matchup against Rakdos Midrange, I think it's going to be quite hard to get in with this because they're going to be running their own Trespasses, they're going to be running Bonecrusher Giants, they're going to be running Shieldred, so I'm not sure how good this is going to be at attacking, to be honest, and they're going to be having their own creature suite in this matchup anyway. And since we are running a Citadel deck, they might actually be more incentivized to go heavier on their creatures to apply more pressure to our life total, so that when we do get a Citadel, we don't have as much life to go off with. So I'm not sure that Trespass is going to be good enough, but I'm definitely going to bear this in mind as I play the matches. If I feel like I want something more against Rakdos, then Trespasser or Glisser are definitely cards that I'd consider there. So that's a sideboard I'm pretty happy with, Daily. Like I said, I definitely do want to have basically all creatures outside of the Fatal Push to be able to keep Collector Company in every matchup. The only time I'm going to be bringing Fatal Push, I'm going to be cutting the Citadel, and I feel like 27 hits is enough for the Collector Company. So next up, I'm going to be building the Manabase. I'm going to stop the recording and just show you the Manabase afterwards, because me building the Manabase takes quite a while and isn't particularly interesting. So I'm going to pause the recording and just show you what I've built afterwards. So I'll catch you in a bit. Okay, so I just put the Manabase together here. I'm going to talk you through what I've got here. So like I said, 21 lands. I'm not 100% set on this, but I feel like from what I've played in Citadel in the past, that seems like a good amount. I definitely don't want to go lower than 21, but I'm going to start off at 21 and see how things go. In terms of the actual lands themselves, we've got all of the good black-green dual lands, Overgrown Tomb, Blooming Marsh, the Pathway, and Llanowar Waste. Now, I'm not thrilled to play Llanowar Waste because you don't want to have that much of a painful mana base with Citadel, because you do want to preserve your life total, but I feel it's very important to have a lot of lands that can tap for green on turn 1 and also produce black later in the game, because the issue with using Llanowar Elves and Elvish Mystic to ramp into the Citadel is we need a green source to play these in the first place, and then these only produce green, and Citadel is obviously triple black, so I feel like Llanowar Wastes is kind of a necessary evil in this deck to ensure that we have enough green on turn 1 to cast the manadorks and still have enough black to be able to ramp into Citadel as well. And to be honest, most other Citadel decks, especially the Jund versions, run more shock lands anyway, so it's not really that much worse, if at all, to be running this. And I do feel it's important to, like I said, have green on 1 for Elvish Mystic and Llanowar Elves, but still be able to cast Citadel later in the game. Then, obviously, Takenuma and Besieger is free to run as one-ofs. I'm definitely running more black sources because, like I said, we need that triple black, and we can ramp into Citadel on turn 3 or 4 fairly easily if the opponent doesn't have early interaction. If we're up against a deck like Mono Green Devotion where we're just trying to race. So I think having a lot of black sources for the Citadel is important. We do need 14 green on turn 1, which we have way over that, which is fine. And then we've got a few basics. I'm not choosing to run any of the creature lands. Hive of the Eye Tyrant is definitely the most playable. Lair of the Hydra is fine as well. But the main reason I'm not running that is because it's very important that we can cast Citadel once we have the mana to do so, right? So say we have, for example, 2 Prosperous Innkeepers that produce treasures. We really need to have that untapped 4th land to be able to cast the Citadel, and we're already running 4 Blooming Marsh that don't do that. So running Hive of the Eye Tyrant in addition is just going to lead to situations where you really need an untapped land to be able to cast that Citadel, which can make a huge difference. Waiting a turn to play Citadel can often just lose you the game. And so I don't really feel like it's worth it. And since we're already running, we're only running 21 lands anyway, so having a land that's going to be entering tapped on turn 3 can stop us casting Collected Company off a Llanowar Elves or Elvish Mystic. It can stop us casting like a Blood Mage or a Strider on curve. So even though Hive is a good card, obviously, I don't think it's worth the risk running in this deck because we really want our lands entering on tap to be able to cast the Citadel later in the game. So that's the deck. I'm pretty happy with this initial build of it. What I'm going to do now is just run it through a constructed event, see how it does. And then if I feel like I need to make any changes, make some changes then and potentially run it back through a constructed event. If not, then I'll just discuss how the deck's been performing after the event. So yeah, next up we've just got some gameplay in the event and we'll see how we go. Okay, sweet, here we go. Okay, so we're going second here. And yeah, this looks fine. We got green and black mana. We got Mystic on turn 1. We are against the Yorion deck, so potentially could be Fires, potentially could be Control as well, if I had to guess. Okay, interesting. So I think I'm going to lead on the Boseiju here. That could potentially be punished later if we are against an Enigmatic Incarnation deck, but since these are pathways here and we do need triple black for Citadel, I would rather play the Boseiju for the Elvish Mystic and then save both of these pathways to play on black, just in case we don't draw many more lands. Okay, so we're almost certainly going to be against the Incarnation deck here. Because of that, I think I'm going to go for Blood Mage. You know, typically, Priest of Forgotten Gods is a card that you want to get in play as early as possible to be able to start activating it, but against Incarnation, I don't think they're going to be playing that many early creatures. Oh, wow, they missed land drops as well, so that's obviously really bad for them. But yeah, either way, we're going to attack him with the Blood Mage here. I also feel like drawing off the Blood Mage is just the best thing to do here. You know, they are going to potentially start interacting with our board. You know, they can pick apart our board fairly easily if they are running Incarnation, so yeah, here, just going to pass with the Collected Company up. Okay, opponent's using Omen of the Sea to try and dig for more lands here, I'd imagine. But yeah, like, Priest is good to get down early against creature decks, but specifically against Incarnation, I'm not too worried about their board, so I'd rather get Blood Mage down early just to see more cards. Okay, we hit double Strider, which this is a lot of pressure here because we have 2 Zulaport Cutthroats, so this represents a lot of direct damage. Okay, sick. We drew another untapped land, which means that we can afford to attack in with the Elvish Mystic here as well. So I think we could just potentially win this turn now. It doesn't look like the opponent has anything here. So if we attack in with the Striders, the Blood Mage, and the Elvish Mystic, that puts them down to 7. And then we're going to get 2 death triggers off every single thing we sacrifice to the Strider. Yeah, 6. So, I mean, obviously opponent stumbled on lands there, but that just shows the power. You know, you don't even need Citadel necessarily. So we definitely want Cankerbloom in this matchup. And I could consider bringing in Midnight Reaper, but I don't know how good that's going to be, to be honest, because most of their interaction isn't destruction based. Most of it is exile in Skyclave Apparition and stuff like that. And I don't mind keeping in a single copy of Priest of Forgotten Gods because they are going to be, you know, podding into creatures off their Incarnation. And so we might want to have access to Priest as a way to interact with the opponent. But for the most part, I think we should be good in this matchup because the only way they have of stopping Citadel is podding in. I guess if they have Archon of Emeria, that could stop it. But I'm not sure how commonly played that is in Explorer because there's no Lotus Field combo. I mean, this is kind of close to a keep here. I don't think I can risk keeping a 1-lander in a 21-land deck, though. Especially if they... I mean... Oh, wow, we got a Mulligan that as well. But, I mean, to be honest, I don't think they're going to have early interaction. I mean, some of these Incarnation builds in Explorer are running Portable Hole. This hand, it kind of sucks to have to put Cankerbloom back because it is one of the best cards in the matchup. You know, we can apply pressure with it and then start applying pressure to the opponent's life total, but I think the best game plan with this hand is to just put the Cankerblooms back, keep all the lands in the Llanowar Elves, and just try and ramp into the Citadel as quickly as possible. Okay, so nothing on turn 2 from the opponent, so could be... Oh, it is an Omen of the Sea. I was worried it'd be an Omen of the Forge. Them taking out Llanowar Elves would be pretty bad for us. But yeah, either way, our whole game plan is just try and ramp into the Citadel as quickly as we can at this point. And to be honest, I think that's a pretty good game plan here because, like I said, unless they have Archon of Emeria, they don't really have good ways to stop Citadel until the turn after it's in play, right? If we whiff off the top and they pod into, like, a Night of Autumn, then that could be rough. Okay, Tyvar's an interesting one here, so I think I'm going to mill here just in case they have, like, a Skyclave Apparition or something. Okay, we hit an Elvish Mystic, which is pretty nice. So now we have the mana to be able to cast the Citadel. Which is pretty nice. Even if they kill one of the Elvish Mystics, we can still potentially draw a land and cast it as well. Okay, they have the Incarnation, so see what they get here. I mean, Archon of Emeria would be kind of rough, but they don't even know that we're on Citadel yet. You know, I've seen some people building versions of this deck that's just Collected Company. So, okay, they go for Apparition. See whether they take an elf or the Tyvar here. Okay, they go for the Tyvar 6. So that's really good because now we can cast the Citadel without playing our land for the turn, which means we're even less likely to break because if we hit a land on the top, then we don't have to worry. Okay, so we've got another castable card on the top, so I'm just going to make a 1-1. If that card on top had been a land, I would definitely choose the draw ability on Blood Mage to clear the top. Okay, now we hit Woe Strider. We're basically guaranteed to win here, right? We're almost impossible to brick. Okay, now we have hit a land on top. I'm going to use the Blood Mage to draw a card and clear the top of the library. Okay, there's a land. There's an Elvish Mystic. So, I mean, we're good to win off the Citadel trigger here anyway, right? We can deal 10 off the Citadel, and the Zulaport Cutthroat will deal 10 as well, in addition. So, yeah, that was pretty sick. Okay, so I'm going 2nd here. And yeah, I think this looks fine, right? We'd obviously love to have a turn 1 elf, especially on the draw, but turn 2 Priest of Forgotten Gods into Woe Strider or Callous Blood Mage is pretty sick. You know, the other thing about Callous Blood Mage that I didn't mention in the deck tech is it enables you to activate Priest on turn 3 because you can go Blood Mage, make a 1/1 straight away, which is very important against opposing creature decks. So that can definitely come up as well. You know, it's another reason why Blood Mage works so well in this shell, because it works nicely with the Priest of Forgotten Gods. So we'll see what the opponent's on here. Okay, Hive of the Eye Tyrant into Thoughtseize. Okay, so potentially against Rakdos midrange here, which it'd be interesting to see how this matchup plays out. I feel like it should be pretty good, right? Because Sacrifice is generally quite good at producing 2-for-1s, and if we can ever put us in a position where we can top deck a Citadel and cast it, they're basically just not going to be able to stop that at all. So I feel like it should be a pretty good matchup, but we'll see how it plays out. So if I was the opponent here, you know, I don't think it's worth taking Blood Mage because we got the second copy. Taking Woe Strider puts it in the graveyard to escape later. While they take the Cutthroat, I was going to say if I was the opponent, I'd be pretty sure I was going to take the Priest, unless they have a Fatal Push. If they have a Fatal Push, that kind of makes sense because they would rather push the Priest than the Cutthroat, because the Cutthroat will deal them extra damage. Either way, definitely going to get the Priest down here because we want to get it down as early as possible to start being able to activate it. Just, you know, if the opponent plays like a Fable or something, we'd love to be able to play Blood Mage, make a token, and sack. Okay, they do have the push, so that kind of makes sense why they took the Cutthroat then. So now we're kind of in a spot, you know, where... Yeah, I was going to say where only running 21 lands can be an issue. I mean, having said that, we were on the draw, so chances of us drawing an extra land here weren't that low, but we could be in trouble here if we just don't draw the third land. Well, these are Heartless Act on the Cutthroat. I mean, I'm pretty happy to see that. Just because the Cutthroat is really not applying much pressure. So if we do draw a land off the top and we get to keep a Woe Strider in play. Oh, wow, they got Shieldred. Yikes. And we didn't draw the third land. So, I mean, unless we draw another land exactly this turn, we have basically no chance of winning. Even if we do, we're so far behind, I'm not sure we'll be able to get there. But I'm going to give it another draw step anyway, just to see. But yeah, this is kind of the issue sometimes with this deck, is that even if we'd had like a turn 1 elf, if the opponent had a fatal push for it, we can be left in a situation where we just don't draw enough lands. I mean, having said that, we do have a lot of ways to ramp, right? Innkeeper also produces a treasure. Woe Strider can scry. Callous Blood Mage can... yeah, I'm just going to concede here. Callous Blood Mage can draw as well. So as long as we can get to our 3 drops, I think it's fine, right? Because like I said, we can scry with Strider. We can activate Priest to draw. We can draw with Callous Blood Mage. So I think for the most part, it should be right. In terms of sideboarding here, I'm not actually sure I'm going to sideboard at all. Like, there's an argument to maybe bringing in Midnight Reaper, but I think Callous Blood Mage is probably better here because it replaces itself regardless, and it also potentially exiles the graveyard, so if they have a Crocs or something, we can get rid of that. So I think the main deck is pretty well set up against Rakdos. Just got to hope to draw enough lands, that's the main thing. But yeah, like I said, you know, there is an issue with this deck running 21 lands, but, you know, Priest draws, Blood Mage draws, Strider can scry, and we do have a lot of ways to ramp as well. Okay, so this is definitely a keep, right? It's like perfectly serviceable hand. We have lands, which can, you know, if we already have 4 lands, if we draw a couple more, we can just play Citadel off the top. And you don't really want to be mulliganing against Rakdos anyway. You know, if you have somewhat of a reasonable hand, you should not mulligan against Rakdos, because they play 1-for-1. And if you start off with fewer hands than the opponent and they lead on like a Thoughtseize or something, you can start falling behind so quickly. So I'm going to lead on the Mystic. If they do have Thoughtseize, it could be kind of rough because they presumably take the Tyvar here, and then we're left with just an Innkeeper. But we then also have a lot of good top decks, right? If we top deck Company, that's great. If we top deck Citadel, we're pretty close to casting it already. I mean, we're not close to casting it yet, but we have the mana stuff here already. Okay, interesting. So Mystic off the top, you know, typically Mystic is a card you want to get in play earlier to be able to activate it. But since we have Tyvar, we can play Tyvar first and then play the Mystic and activate it immediately, which is pretty nice. So just going to run out the Innkeeper here and pass. I kind of prefer playing Innkeeper here as well, because if we draw Collected Company next turn, that enables us to play it on turn 3, which will be very powerful against Rakdos midrange, obviously. So see what the opponent does here. Looks like they're in the tank about something, but yeah, I think we're definitely, you know, if we don't draw something better, probably just going to go Tyvar. And then it's interesting whether we go for the plus or minus. Minusing does make us vulnerable to Bonecrusher Giant, but if they have like a Shieldred's Edict or something. Okay, Collected Company's a sick draw. So now I'm very glad I played the Innkeeper. So yeah, we're going to go for Company here instead, and then we'll go for Tyvar next turn if we don't draw anything better. But yeah, if we had played the Tyvar, it's interesting whether we plus or minus, because if we minus, they can kill it with Crusher, but we get at least the Elvish Mystic back from the graveyard. And if we plus, we're not really doing much with it. I mean, now they have a creature in play. I think I probably would have minused if I played it anyway, but interesting decision point there for sure. So we'll see what the opponent does. Okay, and a Graveyard Trespasser, that's fine. So, see what we hit off the Company here, and then we'll go from there. Wow, okay, that's a great hit. So we hit Woe Strider and Priest of Forgotten Gods, which is really good. Okay, so definitely not going to use the Woe Strider because we want to start activating the Priest. So, going to lead on the Priest activation here, sacking the Innkeeper and the Goat token and see what we draw. This allows us to ramp into Tyvar. We could potentially go Elvish Mystic and Priest as well. Wow, we drew another Priest. Interesting. So now we can go for Tyvar, and I think I'm just going to go for the minus here. We could potentially use the plus to untap Priest, but we've already got 2 in our hand. So we can get back an Innkeeper here. Then we can play a second Priest, and then play a land and an Elvish Mystic. And we can immediately tap the Mystic for mana, activate the second Priest here. So this is a huge turn, or like basically entirely enabled by Tyvar. This is why Priest and Tyvar are so sick. Interesting. Okay, so we drew a Cutthroat, and we can also play the Priest here as well. So we can also, you know, activate this at instant speed during the opponent's turn to not only kill whatever creature they play, like if they play a Shieldred, but we also get to drain them for a bunch because of the Cutthroat here. So unless they have a sweeper, I think we're like almost certain to win this game at this point, I think, because we have like so much damage off these Priests and the Cutthroats. Okay, just a Misery Shadow, that's fine. Even if they have like a Fatal Push to go alongside this, I think we're good. Yeah, okay, sweet. So that was a lot better. And that felt really sick. That's the first time I've really gone off with Tyvar and Priest together. And yeah, that felt really powerful. So I think, you know, like I said, I'm pretty happy with the main deck in this matchup. We've got a lot of tools to 2-for-1 them. And if we can ever resolve the Citadel off the top, they basically can't beat that, I don't think. Unless they have like a Kolaghan's Commander or a Braid in hand. But yeah, I mean, that felt pretty good. Game 1 just came down to us missing land drops. And like I said, you know, we're not even running that many 3-drops, to be honest. I guess we're running Tyvar, Strider, and 3 Blood Mage, but compared to a lot of other Collected Company decks, we're not running that many 3s, so I think 21 lands should be good. Like, we did get burnt by it in that first game, but like I said, we have a lot of ways to dig for lands once we have access to our 3-drops. And from having played Citadel decks in the past, 21 lands has felt like a good amount if you're running 8 manadorks. So before Elvish Mystic was printed, I was running 4 Llanowar Elves, 4 Gilded Goose, and 21 lands felt a good amount there. Now this wasn't historic where you do have access to Phyrexian Tower, but I think it should be, you know, pretty similar here. Okay, so definitely going to keep this, you know. Like I said, you don't want to mulligan very much against Rakdos Midrange, and we potentially got a turn 3 Collected Company here if the opponent doesn't have a Thoughtseize. Okay, so I think opponent's mulligan twice, which is obviously great for us. See what they lead on. Okay, no Thoughtseize. That's a really good sign because, you know, the great thing about Innkeeper as opposed to Llanowar Elves or Elvish Mystic is we're guaranteed the ramp unless they have a way to kill the treasure. Okay, so lead on Harvester. Definitely going to run out the Innkeeper here, and then as long as they don't draw Thoughtseize, we should just be able to go for Company next turn, which is, you know, obviously one of the best cards in this matchup. So we'll see what the opponent does. Okay, they attack with the Harvester, that's fine, we'll let the damage through. Definitely don't want to throw away the Innkeeper here, because if we do get to Citadel, Innkeeper is one of the cards that prevents us from bricking, so definitely not going to be blocking with the Innkeeper anytime soon, so we might as well attack with it, put him down to 19. And then we'll see what the opponent has. The fact they did nothing there makes me think they might have interaction, but they did mull to 5, so there's a chance they just don't have that much in their hand right now anyway. Okay, so they attack with the Harvester. See what else they have. But yeah, again, I'm pretty happy with this situation because we have Strider plus Cutthroat. So as long as we hit 2 creatures off the Company, that's representing a lot of damage straight away. So run out the company here. See what we hit. Wow, okay. 2 Cutthroats. I mean, obviously would have liked to hit a Priest or a 3-drop, but 2 Cutthroats is pretty good here. In addition, because we have Strider and the 3rd Cutthroat. So even if the opponent has interaction, that's a lot of direct damage by just sacrificing our stuff here. Wow, and we hit a Priest as well. That's pretty good. So I think we're going to lead on attacking here. I think the opponent's more likely to hold on to their removal until post-combat if we haven't played anything yet. And then I think I'm going to lead on the Cutthroat first. And if they do have interaction, they might be forced to use it now just to take less damage off the death triggers. And then if they do that, that might mean they have less... Okay, so if far off a Fatal Push, that might mean that they don't have as much interaction for the Priest, which would be really nice. And I'm going for... we could have gone for Strider plus Elves here, but I think Cutthroat plus Priest is much better. And Priest is generally a card you want to get into play as quickly as possible anyway, so that you can start activating it when you don't have Tyvar anyway, obviously. So it looks like the opponent has something else. Or that could just be priority for the blood token, maybe. But yeah, if we get to untap with Priest, I think we're in such a sick position, right? Because we can go Llanowar Elves, gain a life off the Innkeeper, sack the Innkeeper and the Llanowar Elves, which deals 4 damage because of the Cutthroats, and then, we get to draw a card, we get to attack in as well. Okay, they did have a sweeper, but we do a lot of damage off the Cutthroat triggers here. So that puts them down to 6. Wow, okay. Another company off the top is sick there. Strider's still really solid in this matchup anyway, right? So it's a body they have to deal with, and then when they do, we already have enough stuff in the graveyard to be able to escape it into a 5-4, which is going to be hard for them to get past. Also trades with Shieldred, which is really important. Okay, so they push the Elf. I guess they figure they can't take any more damage when they're down at 6 already. We'll just go for another Collector Company here, see what we hit. Okay, 2 Blood Mages. So, I mean, there is obviously the temptation to just make 2 1/1s here and try and go for lethal, but I think that's so greedy if we did that. Right, we're against Rakdos. Everything's going 1 for 1. So if both of these Blood Mages replace themselves, we're just going to pull ahead on card advantage. And I can't imagine from how they've played so far that they don't have a piece of removal here. So we'll attack in here, put them down to 2 potentially. Yeah, it does look like they have something here, I think. So yeah, if we had gone for the greedy 1/1s and they'd been able to recover, say they have another Ritual of Soot or something, that would have been really bad. So I am glad I went for the draw card. I mean, if they have nothing here, then maybe we could have won with the 1/1s, but from the way they've played, they've barely committed anything to the board. So I kind of guessed they had to have some piece of removal there. So either way, I'm just going to play everything else out here. They could have another sweeper, but even then we can just bring back the Woe Strider next turn anyway. And we get a bunch of scries off the Woe Strider to be able to dig for something like potentially a Citadel. And if they don't have a sweeper, they could potentially draw into 2 pieces of single target removal. So they could have killed the Strider plus the Blood Mage, and then we don't have lethal. So committing everything to the board here feels like the right play, because I feel like we can recover from a sweeper, and if they don't have a sweeper, I very much doubt they're going to be able to win from this spot. Okay, so one of the cards is a land, so yeah, that's not going to do it. Sick, we got there, nice. Okay, so we're going second here. And yeah, I think this is good, right? We've got Innkeeper and 4 lands already, so as long as we can hit a 5th land, we can potentially ramp into the Innkeeper on... Oh, now we've drawn a second Innkeeper, we can potentially play Citadel on turn 4, which is really sick. And we've also got Tyvar as well, which is nice. Interesting. So even though we're against Rafine's Tower, Hallowed Fountain, that could be control with Censor, I still feel like I want to run out Innkeeper here, because if we are against control and they don't have exactly Censor or Dry Disruption, getting the treasures in play is going to be really valuable, because it will allow us to cast the Citadel even if the opponent has a sweeper, right? The weakness of relying on a Llanowar Elves to do that is that if the opponent has a removal, that cuts us off casting the Citadel. I mean, we're still not 100% sure what the opponent's on here. Esper could also be like Greasefang potentially. I mean, I'll attack him with the Innkeeper. The fact they haven't done anything yet makes me probably think they're on control. Again, I feel like Innkeeper's more valuable than Llanowar Elves, so I'm going to play that first just to play around Censor. I mean, there's a chance the opponent doesn't want to use Sensor Hit anyway because of the treasures that we have, but going to run it out like this and then see what the opponent does here. Wow, okay, they don't do anything. I mean, wow, and they miss a land drop, so I think, I think it's too risky to go for the Citadel here. I feel like they're almost certainly going to be on control, so I'm going to run out Tyvar first just to see what they do here, if they've got a counterspell or anything. Okay, interesting. Going to run out Priest now to see what they do. And then we can potentially untap the Llanowar Elves. Oh, Shielded's Edict, okay. So maybe I should have activated the Tyvar first, but I had no idea that they were playing that. I guess Esper could also be running Void Rend, so maybe that was a misplay on my part. So I could have tapped the Llanowar Elves for mana first to activate it, but I don't think that would have made much of a difference. Okay, so they are on control. I'm very glad it's sequencing like that, because now we can go Citadel while they're tapped out, and we don't have to use a land, so we get to clear a land off the top, right? If we'd played the pathway first, we would have just completely bricked. Yikes. Hitting Citadel off the top is kind of rough, but I think I'm going to risk it. You know, going down to 17 isn't really much of a big deal, and if we'd hit more good cards off the top, we would have been able to continue. Now, it could be rough if the opponent has a Void Rend or something like that, but if they don't, we can just keep going off here, hopefully. Okay, Collected Company, that's sick. I mean, I hope I don't get burnt by paying 6 life for the additional Citadel there, but I feel like that was probably the right play. Okay, here I'm going to make a 1-1 off the Blood Mage, just because we have a playable card off the top. And making the 1-1 essentially gains us a life back, because we can sack it to the Woe Strider to gain a life, and potentially scry a land away as well. Okay, another Strider is pretty nice, so we're basically just looking for the Cutthroat here. If we can hit Zulaport Cutthroat, we should be good to win. Oh, sick. There we go. Perfect. So on this, I don't think the opponent's going to be running like Stifle. I don't even think Stifle's legal in Explorer, right? So we should just be good to win here, I think. I mean, I might play a few more off the top just to ensure that we do. I mean, we can play a land. Going to play Mystic. I mean, I was just trying to think if the opponent has any way to deal direct damage. I don't think they should do. But yeah, either way, we're just going to sack 10 permanents here, or 10 creatures here, deal 10, and then we deal an additional 10 to the opponent off the Zulaport Cutthroat as well. So unless the opponent has a way to stop the Citadel trigger, we should just be good to win here. I mean, thinking about it, I think it would have been slightly better to sack one of the Striders instead of the Cutthroat, but either way, I think we got pretty clean sideboarding here. We just cut the Blood Mage and the Priest and bring in the Cankerbloom and the Midnight Reaper here. Cankerbloom is nice because it's just an aggressively starting 2-drop that can also kill like portable holes and temporary lockdowns. One thing I want to say is that in this matchup, you generally want to try and, if you have Citadel, try and get to a point where you force the opponent to tap out so you can then resolve it on the backswing. I mean, having the treasures off Innkeeper is really important there, because if you're relying on like Priest or Llanowar Elves or Elvish Mystic to ramp into it, obviously you can't do that after a sweeper because your creatures just die, but that is generally the way that you resolve Citadel the most easily. You know, try and ramp easiest with treasures and then just slam it when they're tapped out. I mean, sometimes you just have to go for it even when they have mana available, but another nice thing about this deck is, or this particular build of the deck, is that Tyvar is a lot more difficult for them to deal with as well. I mean, they're running Shielded's Edict, so that is a little bit annoying, but if it was blue-white control, which is the most common control deck in the format, I guess they have Fateful Absence, but outside of that, it's actually pretty difficult for them to deal with the resolved Tyvar, so I do think the addition of Tyvar does make the blue-white control matchup even better than it used to be. And I think that Control is probably the worst matchup for sacrifice decks in general, because Control tends to take a while to close the game out, and you do get blown out by cards like Farewell. So I do think that Citadel with Tyvar is probably the sacrifice deck that has the best matchup against Control, because you run Collected Company, you run Tyvar, and Citadel working as a way to just completely win the game, even from an empty board, is really huge. So obviously being on the draw here is going to be more difficult. You know, them having access to counter spells earlier is going to be an issue for sure. Be interesting what else they're running black for. You know, they could be running Fatal Push. They could be maybe keeping in Thoughtseize against us as well, potentially, since we are essentially running a combo deck. So, but yeah, we'll have to see. We didn't really get to see too much of their deck, but I mean, I have to assume they're probably just running blue-white splashing black. So I imagine they're still running Teferi. I imagine they're still running Wandering Emperor and stuff like that. But yeah, we'll have to see. Okay, so this hand looks pretty sweet. You know, we've potentially got a turn 2 Tyvar, which is going to be very difficult for them to beat, I think, unless they have like a Sensor or Jwari Disruption. I mean, them being in black does mean they could have Fatal Push for turn 1, whereas blue-white, unless they're running Portable Hold, doesn't really have a good way to deal with the turn 1 elf. But yeah, we'll see what they lead on here. Unless they've disconnected. Oh no, there we go. Sweet. Okay, so lead on a Triome. Just going to shock in the Overgrown Tomb and lead on an Elvish Mystic here. And if they don't kill it, I think I'm just going to slam the turn 2 Tyvar, even if they do have mana open. Wow, Damping Sphere. Huh, that's interesting. I mean, I guess that is a way to stop Citadel. That is also good against mono green. I'm going to plus the Tyvar here just because I don't want to risk the -2 whiffing. I think it's better to wait until we like sack a Canker Bloom and then we can get it back, or... Oh, wow, they have Eliminate. Okay. I was going to say if they have Shieldred's Edict, that's going to be rough, but I didn't think there would be that much chance of them having that. So maybe it's better to go for the minus, but I don't know. I feel like the risk of whiffing when we can wait until we actually have a guaranteed target in the graveyard isn't worth it. But maybe it is. Maybe since we knew the opponent's playing Shieldred's Edict, it's like almost always worth just going for the minus in case they have it. So here we're going to run out the Canker Bloom, I think. Wow, they don't have anything. Okay, interesting. I'm not going to run out the Llanowar Elves because I do want something to be able to recover from a sweeper from. And I also want to keep a mana open to be able to kill the Damping Sphere. Now, maybe there's an argument to not attacking with the Elvish Mystic and playing the Llanowar Elves. Because they could have potentially had Wandering Emperor. But I feel like if they had Emperor, they're much more likely to want to exile the Woe Strider so we can't escape it later. Oh, wow. Okay, Collector Company is great. Having this Boseiju being able to hold on to it is also pretty nice. Wow, they didn't have any interaction. Interesting. I guess it still kind of makes sense for them to plus the Teferi though, because they kind of need to dig for a sweeper at this point. And if they minus, that's kind of a waste because they could just draw closer to a sweeper, if that makes sense. Okay, so they Deluge here. So they're almost certainly going to find a sweeper for next turn, I have to imagine. And thankfully this Damping Sphere does nothing against us until we get a Citadel in play, so we can hopefully just beat them down off the fair game plan. Wow, Midnight Reaper's sick. That's perfect. So now even if the opponent does have like a Supreme Verdict, we get to basically completely refuel. So even though I kind of want to, holding on to Boseiju is pretty nice to kill this Damping Sphere, I feel like we're only losing this match to a sweeper, and if the opponent does have a sweeper, we can just activate Canker Bloom. Now again, I typically don't like overextending into a sweeper, but even if they have Farewell here, we can sacrifice, and I want to try and find Citadel here. We can sacrifice a bunch to scry, and we get to draw so many cards off the Midnight Reaper, so I'm going to commit to the board. So if they don't have a sweeper, no amount of single target removal is going to save them, and if they do have a sweeper, we have so many looks at Citadel that we should just be able to win, hopefully. Yeah, we'll see what the opponent has here. I have to imagine they have found a sweeper through the Deluge. Okay, they do have a Farewell, but that's actually not too bad. Normally that would be kind of rough, but since we have the Striders in play here, we can just scry and draw a bunch. So we're basically just going to scry until we hit Citadel at this point, I think, because we get so many looks at it. So I'm going to scry first before we start cracking like the Canker Bloom or anything like that, because we don't draw off tokens being sacrificed. So we'll activate the Canker Bloom here, take out the Damping Sphere, and now we get to start drawing cards off the Midnight Reaper. This is why it's so good in the matchup. If it was historic where Divine Purge is legal, then I don't think Midnight Reaper would be worth running, but obviously Divine Purge isn't legal in Explorer, so we don't have to worry about that. And the nice thing about being able to sack here is, worst comes to worst, we can always just escape the Woe Striders anyway. Okay, another Reaper's nice. Again, I'm basically just scrying for Bolus's Citadel at this point. Oh, and there it is. Sick. Perfect. And then we can just scry the Midnight Reaper here. Get to draw the Citadel. And then... I mean, Innkeeper, if we knew that was going to be on top when we play this Citadel, I would probably keep that. But we're going to draw it for the turn, so... So now we do get to play the Citadel... Oh, man. I'm going to play the land tapped here just to try and save some life. I mean, that was a decision point there. We could have played the Overgrown Tomb untapped to cast Llanowar Elves from our hand, but we could have very easily won just by playing stuff off the top. And we are down to 11, so, I feel like it was worth it there because if we had hit more stuff off the top, we could have potentially won. So they do have to ferry into Damping Sphere. That is kind of rough, but I feel like we've still got a pretty good chance of winning here. Right, we've still got the Citadel in play. Oh, wow. I mean, we can escape the Strider here to try and clear the top. I'm going to attack the opponent first. Oh, wow, they just didn't have anything. Okay, sick. We got there then. Nice. So in this event, we managed to go 4-1, which is pretty decent. There's probably 2 games that I'm not going to show. First of all, one of the wins was against Rakdos Midrange, and the opponent was just roping so much. So the match was like close to half an hour, and so I don't think that's a particularly fun one to show. And then the other loss that I had, or the one loss that I had, was to Blue-White Control, but that was just a game where I just didn't draw my third land for like 6 turns in 2 of the games, so again, not particularly interesting. Now, that could be a weak point of the deck running 21 lands, but like I've said, I've run a lot of Citadel in the past. I think that match was just bad variance, right? Because as long as you can hit your third land, you can start using Strider to scry, you can start drawing off the Blood Mage, you can start getting stuff off Collected Company as well, so I felt like 21 lands has been pretty good. But yeah, 4-1 is a pretty good start. Next up, we'll just see any changes that we make to the deck. So I'll see you in a bit. Okay, so overall, I'm pretty happy with this deck. I played some more matches with this when I wasn't recording, and the deck felt pretty good overall. I'm pretty happy with the main deck. I think if they print, I think it's called Catacomb Sifter, then that will be a good replacement for Callous Blood Mage as just another Woe Strider-esque effect that makes it even more consistent when you're comboing off with Citadel. But Blood Mage works really nicely, and having main deck Graveyard Hate is really nice, particularly against Greasefang. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with the main deck. Like I said, 21 lands, I could see an argument to going up to 22, but then you'd probably have to cut a Blood Mage, which means Company's less consistent and less impactful because you have fewer 3-drops as well. Sideboard-wise, I feel like the push is a good replacement for Citadel against the aggro decks. Cankerbloom felt great. Having an extra power over Outland Liberator seemed very good in the matchups, because the 2 main matchups where you want this are Enigmatic Fires, where it's important to get in for as much damage as you can early so that you can often just finish them off with Cutthroats and stuff like that. And also Blue-White Control, and obviously applying pressure against control is very important. Phyrexian Revoker, I did manage to play one match against Monogreen Devotion when I wasn't recording, and Revoker was actually surprisingly good. Getting it down early and naming Cura really stifled their ability to produce mana, and then in the second game I managed to get it out. I named Khan, which shut them off pulling anything from the sideboard, so that felt pretty good in that matchup. I didn't get to test Soulless Jailer at all. I haven't faced Greasefang yet, so I'm not sure whether these are good enough against Greasefang, but they do seem like decent options. You know, maybe them getting killed by Fatal Push isn't ideal, but I feel I do want to have creature hate pieces because of Collected Company. And then, as you saw in the game against Control, Midnight Reaper is really, really good, specifically when Divine Purge isn't in the format. So overall, I'm really happy with this deck as a starting point. You know, I'm not sure what changes I would make overall. Like I said, I haven't really got a chance to test these out against Greasefang, so there's a chance that you might want something else for your Graveyard Hate, but overall, I think this is a great starting point for the deck if you want to play Citadel again. I think Tyvar is actually a really good addition to the deck. It works super well with Priest and the Manadorks, obviously, but getting back Cutthroat and Innkeeper that are key combo pieces, both when you're just doing your fair sacrifice game plan and your Citadel comboing as well, seems really sick. So yeah, I'm definitely going to play with this deck some more. I'm probably going to play with this more next season as well, see how high I can get with it in Mythic, because Citadel is one of my favourite decks, so I'd love for it to, you know, to be able to iterate on this and make it even better. I feel like this sideboard is the place where there probably is room for more tweaks and stuff like that, but like I said, I'm going to keep playing with this deck and see how it goes. Definitely let me know in the comments if you've got any suggestions for improvements to the deck, if you've got any questions about the deck at all, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Big up.